Have you ever noticed that really great leaders speak in sound bites? Think about John F. Kennedy talking about going to the moon, or Martin Luther King talking about how he has a dream. When you think about a great leader in history, you think about those short, simple, repeatable sound bites that they give. And the reason for that is because the mind is always trying to reduce a message to something really small. I know that almost every time I speak and I do a Q&A after I speak to an audience, one of the questions is going to be, hey, what is the one thing that you wanted me to take away from this talk? I get that question probably 50% of the time that I speak and do a Q&A. But that says something. That question says something about the audience that I'm talking to. And what the audience wants is a summary they can leave with. So as a leader, if you're running a company, if you've got a thought leader brand, whatever that is, even as a dad, I think in terms of sound bites. Now, I don't always use sound bites. I talk normally, but at the end of every night, I actually say to my daughter, "Who does Daddy love?" She says Emmeline. I say, "Who does God love?" She says Emmeline. And we repeat these kind of sound bites in order to build her self-esteem. Sound bites are very, very powerful because they are distilled messages. Now, the truth is always very complicated. It's nuanced. There's a lot more to the truth. You can't really distill all of the truth into sound bites. But basically, as a leader, what you're saying is, look, I want my audience to leave with something, and if I give them just an entire junk drawer of information, if I verbally, vomit all over everybody, they can't leave with all that stuff. But I want them to leave with one thing at least, something they can pick up and carry with them, some bit of truth, some wisdom, some idea that I want them to adopt. And so I'm going to distill that into a soundbite. Great leaders think in sound bites. Great leaders communicate in sound bites. This video is all about why, but not only that, how to do it. Most people who try to lead get ignored. This is a fact. Most people who try to lead get ignored. If I said to you, name 10 great leaders, that's probably going to be pretty easy for you. If I said name 50 great leaders, that might take you 2 hours just to name 50. Why? Because the brain doesn't have room for 50 great leaders. It has room for really 3 to 5. Maybe it's a stretch to say 10. But the reason is, those people, the reason that you pick those 10 is probably because of great historical accomplishments or sound bites that you remember. Most leaders, because there's millions and millions of leaders, by the way, why are there millions and millions of leaders and you can only name 10? Because your brain can't remember those. I want you, if you're watching this video, to understand how to be one of those 10. What we've got to do, though, is not be ignored. So why are most leaders getting ignored? They're getting ignored because they are trying to communicate too much information. The reality is, I know you've got a lot to communicate. The truth is you have a lot to communicate. You have a lot of knowledge that needs to be communicated. But the people who are listening to you can't take everything. It's kind of like you're throwing a bunch of baseballs at them and they've got one bat and they can only swing, once every 5 or 7 seconds. They're just not going to be able to hit every baseball that you throw at them. So what you want to do is just throw one baseball, wait a second, throw another baseball, and that is basically a soundbite strategy. Long meandering messages do not stick. Long meandering messages in which you just pontificate over and over really don't stick. And look, in business, if you're a business leader, attention is very, very scarce. The average American adult encounters 4,000 to 10,000 advertising messages per day, and that is anticipated to go up even higher, up to 6,000 to 10,000 in the next 24 months from when I'm filming this video. You know that we are being bombarded with messages, so that if you try to speak in a clever way, a nuanced way, some sort of sophisticated way, if you make the cognitive load of your messaging too high, people will not pick it up and you will not be remembered and you will not be respected, followed, or again remembered. This is all according to brain science too. In a study on information overload on social media, researchers found that when users receive information at a rate far higher than they can process, their ability to absorb, process, and forward information declines significantly. What that means is word of mouth stops dead in its track about whatever you're trying to do. That means high exposure leads to lower retention and lower likelihood of engagement. This is on a study on information overload in social media. Another study in 2022 found that High exposure to advertising affects memory and source attribution. Under heavy exposure, people are more likely to forget where a message came from or to default to thinking any unclear message is just another ad. In other words, a great ad, if you're doing any sort of advertising, has to use these short, memorable sound bites or it will just be forgotten and it won't be taken seriously. This creates a clutter effect. So many messages competing at once pushes audiences to develop mental filters. They start ignoring or tuning out most advertising and background messaging unless something stands out sharply. A sign, a jingle, a phrase they can quickly latch onto. This phenomenon is widely referred to as advertising or messaging clutter. Now that's true in the advertising and marketing world, but it's true for you as a communicator. I've had to learn this kind of the hard way as a leader. I run a company, we have about 38 employees and we have about 1,000 in our certified community. And what I've found is I need to distill things into simple messages and repeat them over and over. In fact, I've kind of got a really simple factory floor of the way our company works. I can draw it on a whiteboard. And I was in a leadership meeting yesterday and I drew it on the whiteboard and I was emphasizing how much we need to repeat things in order to get the rank and file to understand what we're doing. I turned around to my president and I said, by the way, how many times do you think I have drawn this publicly in front of the same audience? And he said at least 10. Like this is the 10th time I've seen you draw this, I've seen you go through it, and I've seen you communicate it. That's after 10 years of running a business. I've realized I've got to distill things into short, simple sound bites, and I have to repeat them over and over if I expect for people to understand them. That's a little leadership tip for you. The solution, use sound bites. So you want to say less, and you want to say that information in a way people understand, remember, and repeat. Okay, so what is a soundbite? And I'm going to show you some examples from Steve Jobs, Mother Teresa, some leaders here in a second. But what is a soundbite? It is a short, vivid, repeatable phrase designed to trigger recall and reaction. You actually have to think it through. How am I going to communicate this? Will it be remembered? Am I using language that has high cognitive load that people can't understand? Let me show you an example from Steve Jobs. This is his launch of the iPod. Now, do you remember the iPod? I missed the iPod, actually. The iPhone is great, but I remember that little dial and the button. That thing sold 50 million units. It's an unbelievable success story. But when he launched it with a soundbite. So 50 million units launched with a soundbite that people could understand and repeat. And that was 1,000 songs in your pocket. Watch this clip.
This amazing little device holds 1,000 songs, and it goes right in my pocket.
Okay, that is the killer soundbite, and you better believe that was rehearsed. I mean, look at him. He's holding it. This amazing, he tells you it's amazing. He doesn't just say this device. This amazing device holds 1,000 songs, and then physically, and it goes right in my pocket. This is like an infomercial demonstration. You think of Steve Jobs as a great visionary leader, and he was also a pitch man. And nobody thought of him as a pitch man, but that's what he's doing. He's running an infomercial right here, and he's physically demonstrating that you can put 1,000 songs in your pocket, and 1,000 songs in your pocket, that short grouping of words, sold 50 million units, along, of course, with a really great product. Why did that soundbite work? The simple benefit is instantly understood. Again, zero cognitive load. Nobody has to think to understand what you're talking about. Makes you want to buy it in order to touch it. Also makes you want it. Easy to repeat. Have you heard about the iPod? 1,000 songs in your pocket. Let's look at somebody who's not in the business world. I respect Mother Teresa a great deal, but when you think about what Mother Teresa did in her lifetime, there are so many nonprofit leaders, there's so many compassionate people, there are millions of people who do similar work to Mother Teresa, but she's the one we remember. Why is that? Well, it's sound bites like, not all of us can do great things, but we can do small things with great love. She would repeat that everywhere she spoke. Whenever she was talking to a reporter, she would repeat it. Now, there's a lot of things that she can tell people in order to be more compassionate and help the world, but she distilled it into a soundbite and ran it as a messaging campaign, teaching an audience to memorize that idea. So why did that work? It's universal. Anyone can act on it. It inspires empathy, connection, and movement. It is, of course, memorable and repeatable. And I would say if you said, can you give me a quote by Mother Teresa, anybody who's familiar with her, that would be the quote. Well, why is that the quote? That's the quote because she wrote it, she memorized it, she repeated it, she leveraged that quote in order to change the world and really define her legacy. Common characteristics of great sound bites: short, repeatable, and emotionally resonant. You want to test that. You're in line at Starbucks, test your soundbite to see if people emotionally resonate with it. It is designed ahead of time. This is not accidental. It is crafted. You can actually craft that soundbite. Actually craft the soundbite, go to AI, say, hey, what do you think of this soundbite? Do you think it'll be emotionally resonant? Here's what I'm trying to accomplish. Or tell AI, this is what I'm trying to accomplish. Can you give me 3 or 4 soundbites that I can test that become my leadership soundbite that define my personal brand? It's a great exercise. Also, meant to be understood, remembered, and most importantly, repeated. All right, why do sound bites work to make you a stronger, more memorable, more respected leader? There are several reasons. Short phrases reduce cognitive load. It is easier to process why you matter, why you can help me survive, if you can reduce that pitch into an actual soundbite. They're memorable. The memorable bits trigger recall. Our memory prefers compact, vivid chunks. In other words, the reason that most leaders are forgotten is they don't trigger recall easily through sound bites. Repeatable phrases reinforce neural pathways. Message sinks in deeper. They metabolize or internalize that information when you make it super, super simple in the form of a soundbite. So how does this apply to you as a business leader or business owner? Here's the fact. Your audience is distracted. They are not paying attention. And most leaders that I work with, when I'm trying to help them craft their personal brand or their message, they assume wrongly that an audience is pouring a glass of scotch and sitting down for an hour to try to understand their pitch. And that's the first thing I have to explain to them. I have to say this audience is distracted, this audience doesn't care about you, and this audience is listening kind of subconsciously for triggers or cues to make them turn their head and say, okay, wait, what are you talking about? And that trigger or cue is always one thing. It's just one thing. It's survival. So unless you are saying sound bites that somebody would go, wait a second, that guy just said something that might help me survive. That's the only thing that's going to get their attention. And so you have to have these survival sound bites. I call them survival sound bites that make people say, wait a second, you have something for me. You can help me save money. You can help me be a better dad. You can help me live longer. You know, whatever that is, you can help me be more comfortable. You can help me get better sleep. You can help me mitigate the risk in the stock market. You know, whatever that is, that soundbite needs to be so clear, so punchy, but it needs to trigger my response, and that is, this person is going to be able to help me survive. They are distracted, and survival is the only thing they are paying attention to. You only get a few seconds, and I would actually say 2 seconds, to make that impression. Whenever you walk on stage to give a keynote, you should open up with a soundbite, right? Whenever I walk on stage and give a keynote, one of the first things I say, if not the first things I say, is people are ignoring you, and I want to teach you to speak in such a way that they pay attention. What does that do? It triggers the entire audience's survival desire. You're going to get people to pay attention to me. They're ignoring me. By the way, if people are ignoring me, that's a survival liability. If people pay attention to me, that's a survival asset. I am now going to listen to Donald Miller. So I have taken that soundbite and used it over and over to develop, to create kind of a personal brand around the idea of communicating clearly and communicating in soundbites. A strong soundbite makes you heard, remembered, and shared. And that is what I want for you leaders. I want people to listen to you, I want people to remember you, and I want people to talk about you. So your assignment after watching this video, I want you to figure out your first soundbite. What is it that you offer the world? What's the bit of survival asset that you have that other people can use in order to enhance and improve their lives? What is that? Spend some time with AI, spend some time figuring that out, and then start using that soundbite. All great messaging campaigns are exercises in memorization. And what I mean by that is you are trying to get your audience to memorize something. What is the soundbite that pertains to you as a leader that you want people to memorize? And then begin to repeat that. Now, if you're a leader and you're launching a product, what is the soundbite about the product? If you're launching a brand, what is the soundbite about the brand? If this is an internal change initiative, What is the soundbite about that change initiative? And by the way, if you want to see me give an example of a great soundbite strategy, for instance, in one of my videos, I unpack the Don't Mess with Texas campaign and why it worked. I talk about Gwyneth Paltrow building a personal brand around Goop. All sorts of stuff, from national defense to launching products. I send out one video per week in which I analyze a successful soundbite strategy. Some of those I've come up with myself on behalf of clients. Some of them are just famous throughout history. If you want that video, it is not on YouTube. It's only to our exclusive community. All you have to do is go to weeklysoundbite.com, or if you're watching this on a computer, pick up your phone and scan it. We've got thousands of people get this video every week. I want you to be there. And if you watch these videos, even if you watch half of them, you will be transformed into a soundbite specialist. You will start thinking in soundbites and communicating in soundbites without even having to try. All you have to do is watch these videos. So go to weeklysoundbite.com and I will send you a soundbite strategy every week. I want you to be transformed into a soundbite specialist, a leader people listen to and follow.